Modern AI and the momentum behind it is now highly likely to represent the biggest economic and societal shifts since the Industrial Revolution. It will probably, in a short number of years, do just about everything we call work. Modern LLMs and their progeny will directly do knowledge work, and they'll start with the jobs that require the least amount of sophistication. Arguably, that's most of customer service work, and so Intercom is very much in the middle of the action. Our AI team is led by a man named Fergal Reid. He's been building customer service AI solutions with us for at least 6 years, long before it was hot and cool in the way it is now. In this episode of Off Script, Fergal's going to take a step back and talk about the recent history of machine learning, why the direction it's headed is so relevant to customer service, and get into the details about how these AI customer service systems will need to be built. He'll compare the thin wrappers that are now proliferating with the deep AI-first system that Intercom is uniquely offering. Fergal is a character, and importantly, probably smarter than the rest of us too. He's the guy to learn from in this space at this moment. And I hope you enjoy this one as much as I know I will too.
As a machine learning expert, you've been used to being bitten by systems so many times. I actually think a lot of people who are experts in machine learning have underestimated the power of large language models because they are so used to getting taken in by a system and thinking it's amazing, and then, oh, now I see what the trick is. This actually wasn't that good at all. So the day ChatGPT came out, we weren't expecting it. I started to become pretty shocked with its ability. It did an astonishingly good job at what seemed like very simple synthesis. So I tried to ask it questions about a lot of different topics. Let's try get it to do something that clearly wasn't in its training data set. Let's ask it really oddball queries. And it did a really good job on those. And I was like, whoa, hang on. That's new. This is much better than we thought these large language models were going to get this fast. You don't get to see the start of a technology revolution that's that big very many times. So really these breakthroughs like what we're all calling ChatGPT, they really kind of belong in the sub-part of machine learning or artificial intelligence called natural language processing. And people have been trying to build computer systems to try and understand natural language for decades. They've been trying to build machine translation. They've been trying to build computer systems that will consume text in English and translate it to French for literally decades. And for a long time, people started out trying to handcraft rules, write if statements. But it's hard. It's really hard to write rules to translate reliably from one language to another. And, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, people really started to get interested in statistical machine learning techniques to approach this translation problem instead. So don't handwrite all the rules. Instead, get a whole lot of data, documents from the UN, something like that. Long documents that have been translated into many different languages and feed them all into a machine learning system and have it try and learn how to speak one language from the other. And there was a really impactful paper called Attention is All You Need, which really attempted to come up with a new way of trying to do this, sequence-to-sequence translation. And the kind of idea was that hey, if I've got to translate from one language to another, I sort of need to know, the words, but also the context of the words. And it's kind of hey, if there's a sentence about bank, and if there's another word in that sentence, river, well, that tells me something about the meaning of that word bank. To really get good at this, in some sense, you've got to know that, hey, you should pay attention to that word river when you're trying to find out the meaning of the word bank. And so people came up with these attention-based algorithms, and they were all sort of wrapped up into a machine learning technique called a transformer. And really what kind of OpenAI did was they took these transformers and they really scaled them up. They really trained them on more data than anyone had done before. And something really sort of surprising happened, right? Which is you take this machine learning technique, it's designed for translation, it's designed for learning kind of relations and relations and attention between words, when you push like enough data through these transformers and you make them bigger and bigger, they seem to start to kind of understand things. They seem to be able to do not just like one task, not just translation. They seem to actually be able to do stuff like understand instructions, understand things like summarization, right? So take a long document and make it small. And that's remarkable. That's really a breakthrough. And, you know, kind of it's a breakthrough in terms of algorithms, but more so it's really a breakthrough in terms of quantity, in terms of this core idea of machine learning, which is that like, hey, you don't need to like tell the computer exactly what to do. You instead teach it how to learn and then put tons of learning information through it and it'll start to do remarkable things. And there is a sense in which this whole ChatGPT revolution, or whatever we want to call it, is really the promise of machine learning and artificial intelligence really starting to come true, which is that like systems are doing truly remarkable things when we just push enough data through them. People sometimes ask me what's possible with this new technology. And the honest answer is that today, we don't know yet. Certainly we know many things that are possible now that weren't before, but it's not easy to set limits. And the reason it's not easy to set limits is because, you know, there's the things this technology does out of the box in ChatGPT as OpenAI have deployed it. But it's also like, well, what does it fundamentally unlock? And the reason why it's hard to tell what it fundamentally unlocks is because when you get a new piece of technology, there's the engineering challenge, right? There's a new capability it gives you, but there's then like, well, how far can we push that capability when we go and we learn how to use this as a building block? And the history of new technology has always been like this. If you take the early days of like the Industrial Revolution, steam engines, right? The first application of steam engines is pumping water out of a coal mine. And that's cool. When that comes out at the time, people are like, wow, there's something new here. But if you run a shipping company and you're doing barges, well, it doesn't seem very applicable to you because it's like, you know, those steam engines, they're big, they're heavy. Someone would need to build an entirely new rail infrastructure before this would affect you. That's probably going to take 100 years to happen. It's like, well, no, if it's valuable enough, people will build that infrastructure. And I think we're seeing that with AI at the moment. We've had this like huge capability unlock, and now we're in the middle of this like infrastructure rollout. Everyone is figuring out, okay, this core new thing, how do I turn that into a product for my application, for this other application? You know, if we need to scale computation, we're going to do that because the core value is there. Humanity has done this before. Like when something like the build out of rail was fast, and like countries put substantial portions of their GDP towards building rail once we had steam engines. It was a very short hop from, hey, you have a steam engine that actually works and does something useful, to like your entire transport infrastructure now runs on steam. So things can happen fast when the value is there, and I think we're going to see that with AI. There's a very interesting thing about this technology, which is that sometimes I feel experts almost get tripped up looking at it. Sometimes, a random human person off the street looks at ChatGPT and they're like, wow, this is pretty good. This is able to do something that the computer wasn't able to do before. That's remarkable. And then sometimes you have an expert in machine learning and they know a little bit more about how this technology is supposed to work underneath the hood. And sometimes that trips them up because they're like, oh, well, it's just doing token prediction. That's all it's doing. And it's like, but hang on, you should pay attention to the fact that, yeah, okay, it's only trained to do token prediction. It's only trained to predict the next word in a sentence. But it's learning to do remarkable things from this. Pay attention to the remarkable things it's learning to do. Sometimes when you understand something, you can fail to pay attention to what it's actually doing. So people in this space talk about token prediction a lot. And I'd say there's two things you need to know about tokens. The first thing is that, hey, you can just think of them as words, right? They're just a more efficient way of training a model than have it train on either like letters or words. Token is kind of like a syllable of a word, roughly, right? And it's efficient to have these models learn things, not at the level of a word or of a letter, but of somewhere in between. Because it can understand like, hey, there's a relationship between the singular of a word and the plural of a word, but it doesn't have to reconstruct everything from letters. The second thing you need to know about tokens is that when somebody says, oh, these models are just doing token prediction, don't pay too much attention to that. That is how the models are trained, but it's not a good guide to understanding what they can do. There's many products that you can look at this technology and you can be like, well, it seems like it's useful, but it's got some limitation. Yeah, but maybe you can work around that limitation. And we saw this with our bot, Finn. And when we set out to build Finn, we were trying to use GPT-4 and we were like really worried about hallucinations. Okay, what's a hallucination? The AI model, when asked to make a prediction, it'll just do its best job of making a prediction. And if it doesn't know the answer or it doesn't remember the answer, it will just do its best job, and sometimes that best job will be wrong. And we refer to that as a hallucination. And we really discovered that the hallucination problem wasn't nearly as bad as we first thought. We just had to use it in this certain way, this way of retrieval augmented generation, which is this idea that like, hey, don't just ask the AI system what it thinks the answer to a question is. Instead, give it like a document or give it some context and then say, hey, what's the answer to the question in this context? Don't use anything else. And that's essentially RAG. It's like you go and retrieve a bunch of context and you use that context to like augment the generation that the language model does. And it took a while for us to crack that. But once we did, we were like, wow, this is really working. This is able to give people answers to customer support questions without making things up nearly as much as ChatGPT will. And so I think, it's very difficult as a result to set limits on what this technology will or won't be able to do. So we have really taken a bet on AI at Intercom. And we've done this because we work in customer service. And customer service just has always felt to us like maybe the prime domain for the application of this AI technology. Why is that? Why is customer service so much in the sweet spot of this AI? Well, the first thing to realize is there's a lot of inherent structure in customer service. Most customer service conversations, they kind of start the same, they maybe end the same. The middle can be complicated and different. But even in that middle, there's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of customer support representatives answering the same questions day in, day out. And once we have machine learning systems that are good enough at understanding language and understanding context to actually begin to address these conversations, well, that repetition just makes it a prime candidate for AI. AI is very good at learning how to do something again and again and again. And so that's really what the company is betting extremely big on. And I think it's the right bet. I think you can't be in customer service and ignore AI. It's just too big. So if you have tens or hundreds of thousands of customer support conversations happening each month, no manager can read them all. No manager can look at them all. But AI can, and that's new, that's transformative. You can detect trends here that no human will be able to. You can detect increases in customer satisfaction and decreases in customer satisfaction. You can detect when an answer that used to be right is no longer helping people. And so we just think that there's massive potential here for next generation tools, so you can't ignore it. How hard is it to build a bot like Finn? And the hard piece is trying to make it industrial strength, trying to make it actually something that you can use in a business setting. So if you want to just take ChatGPT and take all the trade-offs that were made with ChatGPT and turn that into a customer support chatbot, that's kind of easy. You can do that probably in a matter of weeks. So why have we spent the last year with this really big team working on Finn? Well, it's because the exact trade-offs of ChatGPT we've never felt were completely right for customer service. ChatGPT will talk to you about any topic you want. Customer service, you want to be able to constrain what your agent does and does talk to users about. Also, you want it to use information that's in sources that you trust. You don't want it to use all the information on the internet. We often use the analogy of a self-driving car. If you want to build a self-driving car that just goes on a closed circular loop, well, it's not easy, but it's doable. It's been doable for decades. If you want to build a self-driving car that goes through a city environment, it's surprisingly complicated. And so building a support chatbot's a little bit like this. If you want to build something that answers a question And it's the exact question the bot's been trained on. Hey, that's pretty easy. But if you want to build something that will perform gracefully and robustly when people ask it weird questions, or a question that's similar to what's in your knowledge base, but not the same, well, that's suddenly a lot of work. A real problem with AI systems is that it's very easy to build something that seems like it's working when everything's going well, but actually breaks really badly when something unexpected happens. So when you're evaluating an AI system, you can't just stay on the happy path. You've got to treat it the way it'll be treated in the real world. Ask it a question that it shouldn't answer. Ask it a question about politics. Ask it a question about your competitors. That's when you'll see, is this thing actually industrial strength? When you treat it the way your users are going to treat it once it's live. When we shipped the first alpha versions of Fin over a year ago, it resolved about 28-30% of customer support questions. Now, that number is closer to 45 this last month. Each percentage point there is typically an A/B test, typically a machine learning research and development process. And so yeah, overall, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of time to build something from like a toy or a prototype to something that's actually industrial strength that can be trusted in like difficult application areas. One thing that's really challenging at the moment when building AI tools is it's very easy to have them address a very large number of jobs badly. Because it's so easy when you go to market to just try and say, hey, it's going to help you do X and Y and Z badly. And people will look at those and they'll be like, wow, I want that. It does all these things for me. And they'll try and use it. And your initial stats will be great, but then they won't retain. And so I think that working in AI, building AI products at the moment, you want to exercise discipline. You want to pick a small set of tasks that you can really over-deliver on so that people can go and use those as part of a workflow, as part of a productivity task, and actually retain. And it's an anti-pattern at the moment to try and build AI products that are like too broad, that like do a lot of things poorly. You know, start out by picking a job, doing something great, communicating to users, this is a product that does great at this job, and resist the urge to like pull your product into territory that your product cannot deliver at. In the AI product development discussion, there's a lot of discussion around like a thin wrapper. Is your product a thin wrapper of ChatGPT? And absolutely, it's pretty easy to build a product that's a so-called thin wrapper that essentially is just ChatGPT, but applied to a specific area. Anywhere you've got a text box, you can stick ChatGPT into it. But the problem with that is that you have to accept all the exact same trade-offs of ChatGPT if you want to do that. And it's quite easy to get to market with a bad, thin product in that way. And I don't want to knock it. Sometimes there are certain limited application areas where that's a good thing to do. But very frequently, the exact trade-offs that ChatGPT was built with are not what you want for your product. So if you look at like Fin as an example, Fin is built using the OpenAI models as components. Fin is really 5 or 10 different prompts underneath the hood, each one that does a specific task well. So one task is like to search in a knowledge base to answer a question. Another task is to disambiguate the user's query. And what we have done is we have taken Fin, we've really used OpenAI's models as building blocks from which to build this overall system. And I would say like that's the right way to do it. For any sort of non-trivial software development application, you really want to say, okay, from an engineering perspective, how do I need to build my product here? What are the like 5 or 10 things that I need AI to do? And then, insulate and isolate with good engineering practice each one of those things separately, and just using OpenAI's models as tools to deliver each of the building blocks you need. Then once you've done that, they can be tested, they can be refined, they can be A/B tested independently of each other. And that's how you can really make a great product experience. And I guess you could call that a thick wrapper by contrast to this discussion of like thin wrappers. So what is the right structure for fast innovation in AI? I think the industry as a whole is still figuring this out. At Intercom, we have a centralized AI team that has a skill set that marries together the product development tactics that are needed with the technical knowledge. And so what do we mean? What product development tactics do you need? Well, you need to be very scientific. You need to have a very quantitative mindset. You need to build prototypes fast and get them in front of your customers as soon as you possibly can, and then very dispassionately, scientifically measure them. Why do I emphasize this measurement? Well, if you're building a standard SaaS feature that's extremely UI heavy, an expert designer is going to be able to look at that and they're going to be able to say, yes, I am confident that UI is going to solve the customer problem. If you want to build an AI feature, hey, it's going to perform differently for every individual customer depending on their data. And so it's not enough to just eyeball it, because you might just end up with like a simple text box and all the complexity is hidden in what happens to that text box. Often when AI products, value increases in a way that's like invisible from a UI perspective. And an example of this is our bot Finn. Finn's resolution rate over the last year has steadily climbed, and the visual experience of Finn hasn't changed that much. All that work is underneath the hood. It's the iceberg underneath the ocean. I'm always trying to go to our high-level stakeholders and say, look, the UI hasn't changed, but the product is way better. And at Intercom, we're a culture, we celebrate shipping. And if you celebrate shipping, it's very easy to celebrate shipping UI, because UI is like clearly new visible stuff you shipped. You need to reorient yourself from celebrating the shipping of new visible UI to instead like celebrating when metrics slowly climb up, fighting for 1 percentage point improvement over the next. Because each percentage point improvement can mean like tens or hundreds of thousands of real users that asked a question and actually got their answer. Like a beautiful UI of the bot saying, sorry, I can't help you with that. It doesn't move the needle here. So one thing we think a lot about at Intercom is, what does the future of customer service look like in terms of AI breakthroughs? Well, the models are getting smarter all the time. And the leap from GPT 3.5 to GPT 4 was astounding in terms of the ability to understand and reason about things. And so we think that as these models are going to get more and more powerful, they'll be able to unlock the solution to not just informational queries, not just simple actions, but to like quite complex debugging, quite complex chain of reasoning. And we think that might come pretty soon. We're very excited about that. So we see a future world here where like the best customer support agent in the world is not a human. It's a bot. And it's a bot that has learned and trained everything that's needed to be absolutely expert at customer support. And then even, I think over time, it's going to get increasingly agentic. So it's not just going to be, sitting inert in the inbox answering customer support questions. It's going to be a core part of your business. Maybe it's going to show up on Slack. When it doesn't know the answer to something, it's going to go and ping someone on Slack. It's going to handle the routing and the bringing of an expert human in when it's unsure or when it needs escalation. All of that stuff is buildable, probably even with the technology we have now, or certainly with the technology that's coming soon. In a future world where we want AI systems to be able to take more and more actions on our behalf, the stakes do get higher. Some of those actions are going to be destructive. It's going to be the case where like, hey, if you issue a refund to this one customer, it's fine. But if you issue a refund to customers who don't ask for it, or customers who shouldn't get it, to fraudsters, it's a major problem. And so the stakes always raise. And yeah, at the moment we're automating informational question answering. There's a lot of road to run on that yet. But I think we're heading for a future where AI systems are going to be trusted to take those actions in a very autonomous way, but the quality is going to have to increase. And the level of control, you're going to need some control plane. We're spending a lot of design time trying to figure out what does that look like? Like, how do you set policy that helps it do the right thing, that helps it make the right decision? We think there's a substantial design challenge there, and that's the kind of thing we're thinking about a lot in future at the moment in Intercom. From a unit economics point of view, AI-powered customer support is amazing. From a speed and latency of user experience point of view, it's amazing. And the quality bar is raising all the time. And so eventually, the end user expectation is going to change here. We do think there's an amazing AI agent customer support product that can be built here. Something that's going to be able to handle almost all of your informational queries, regardless of what source of data you give them. It's It's going to be brilliant at email. It's going to be brilliant at Messenger. Maybe even in some day, it's going to be brilliant at voice.
Thank you.
The advice I would give is that you can't ignore AI. Like, it's real. Is it ready for your specific business yet? Maybe, maybe not. But if you are a B2B SaaS app or an e-commerce platform or anything like that where, you can tolerate like very occasional error, this thing is going to change how customer support works, and it's past time to be at least aware of that. It's going to change for all of us. How soon that is in the exact shape, we'll have to see.